am I saying? What am I saying? And then I'm going to like spitball too long.
Yeah.
And that's what you don't want, right?
I don't mind. The more you talk, the better, man. Especially when I go up to kids after games, they're always kind of on the spot. So it's always quick, short answers. So I like to send them, when I do interviews like this with you, Jacob, I like to send them in advance and get you a little bit of a heads up.
Yeah, for sure.
I appreciate you taking the time, man. It means a lot. I'm a
for sure.
Big fan of your game, dude. I've been watching your highlights for a long time. I haven't yet to see you in person yet, but I've been a big fan of your game for a couple of years now. And we'll get right into it. I won't take up too much of your time. Jacob Antchak, 6'8", CTA West, one of the top dogs in Canada right now. A top 10 prospect in my books, no doubts. Can you tell everybody about a little bit about your high school career, the journey so far, where you've played, what are keys to your development? Just speak on your high school career a little bit so everyone can have a little bit of context before we get into the interview.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of people that are close to me know that I've kind of gone around a little bit. I started at Walnut Grove, which is like just down the road from me. You know, you go down, take a right, take a left, and you're there. Then I went to LBA, which is close to you guys, right?
Yeah,
so I played under Angelo, and Tiki was there and all that. Cam was there. So that was a lot of fun. Even like Dang, you know, those kind of guys. And then I went to Wasatch, and that was down in Utah in the middle of nowhere. It's in Mount Pleasant. Anthony, for other people in Canada, they'd know Anthony Rajesh, right?
Yeah, I love him.
Great guy. He's down at Sam Houston right now. And then I went up to CTA West in Calgary, right from there, actually, same year. So in the 1 year, I was at 3 spots, but I'm happy where I am now. I've got a great coach in Adam Huffman, and so that's kind of where I'm at, right?
So what was that experience like, bopping around through?
You completely cut out. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. What was the experience like going from London, Ontario, to Utah, now to Calgary? You're born in Langley, BC, correct? Or am I?
Yeah. No, I'm born in Abbotsford, but grew up in Langley.
Okay, Abbotsford, BC. So like you've been around the map and back. So it's like what's that been like, traveling around for multiple years of high school? Most kids go to high school for 4 years, they're at the same school, and they're giving her there. What's it been like traveling back and forth like that?
It's actually been a pleasure because I went to London. I went at like 16 years old, right? So I went like kind of young. Most people go for their post-grad year to prep or whatever. But actually, the person who really pushed me towards it was Elias, who used to work at North Pole Hoops, obviously, and he helped me. And he said Angelo was a great coach, and the Tiki was there and everything. So I was like, okay, I can't turn this opportunity down. Went there, great family feeling, great program. It was everything it was said to be, right? But then I had an opportunity arise at Wasatch. So like, okay, I'll head there. Went there kind of off of a whim. And it was, I don't know, like it was interesting. You go from one of the biggest cities in, Canada. You go from like Vancouver to London. That's not that big of a change. It's pretty urban, right? Mm-hmm. And then you go into like the bushes, man. Like it was weird. And the elevation change, like I'm used to like sea level stuff, right?
Oh yeah, it's a different demographic out in Utah, man, for sure. Like, I've flown through Utah a couple times for tournaments and stuff, but it's mountains, it's bare, it's a different culture out there. It's you're pretty much just locked in on ball, I guess, eh? Ball is cool.
Yeah. So Anthony will tell you this too, right? Like the elevation when you first get there, like I puked. Like we ran lines my first time I was there. Like as soon as my dad left, we started just like they were doing conditioning, and man, I just was like I passed out. Like I looked like it was bad. Like I looked like I was completely out of shape. It was horrible because just the elevation was so bad, But yeah, you're in the middle of nowhere and basically just ball. You're in this like little dome. Like you can't see Salt Lake City. You're surrounded by mountains, and there's this little overpass that just goes over the mountain, just like that. So that was Utah. Left there, went to Calgary, another highly elevated place. But when you're coming from Utah, it wasn't so bad.
Yeah,
just really cold. Basically, you're over the mountains, and then you can kind of see the prairie starting to flatten out a little bit. So geographically, I was kind of used to it. You're near the mountains, whatever. But the basketball culture, I was completely new to it. I came in and I was like, I had no idea what to expect. So even now, I think it's more of a growing culture. I'm not too involved with a lot of Calgary basketball, but no, I've loved it so far. It feels like a second home with the people that are there. So like Ian and Lance, our two trainers there, those are like brothers to me, man. And even our team, like last year, CTA West, I won't lie, it wasn't like when I went there last year, we weren't great, but it was one of the best group of guys I'd been with. And then this year we got a lot better. So
no, that's great, man. That's like it's crazy having a journey like that, because it's a very different journey from a lot of different high school players. And you seem to be doing really well. And like you said, the trainers are like your brothers, and you can tell by the way you're built right now that you're like a brick shit house, man. You're built like a stud. So I just kind of the next question I got for you is, what's the hardest part about being a Canadian prospect, trying to get recruited? What are some of the challenges you've overcome? Like, you see kids in the States, you're at Wasatch, you probably see multiple coaches in the gym at your practices, high level, high major, mid majors, low majors, all kinds of coaches, all different walks of life coming through the Wasatch gym. And then you come up to LBA or a CTA West, and I know those are very accredited schools, but they're not getting the recruitment that you would in the States, that you would in a Utah or in a California or anywhere else in the States, right?
Yeah. Man, the hardest part about being a Canadian kid is just that, like any international player, like I've met guys from Europe too, is that you don't get the same shake. Like guys that are local, like, so imagine this, right? Like even when I go to runs locally and you go to, like, let's say like a U Sports school invites you out, like UBC invites you out or whatever, you get a chance to perform in front of these schools whenever, right? So for these American kids too, even when they're just working out in the summer and they know this player, their brother played at some university, it's like, okay, you're sitting next to these universities, you get to go scrimmage and go to these runs, and you might get an offer from a run. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that too. Straight up,
man. I was don't mean to go on a rant here, but I was coaching at Athlete Institute a couple of years back when Ben Hendricks was there. He's a big man, plays for Ball State right now in Division I. He was doing a drill. St. Bonaventure was in the gym watching her practice. He was just doing the drill. He was hitting it off the glass, hit it off the glass 10 times, dunk it. Hit it off the glass 9 times, dunk it. But he was just tapping the glass. I leaned over to him when he was doing about 8 runs. I said, hey, smash it off the glass. Hit it hard. He started hitting the glass so hard the whole backboard was shaking, dunking it, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. That end of practice, St. Bonaventure walks over, he picks up an offer. And it's like, this kind of stuff can happen in the States. Yeah. It doesn't happen up here in Canada as much as it should.
Yeah. No, I do really like that, because it's true, right? Like, you can just be doing anything and there could be a coach in the gym. When you're down in the States, like, those opportunities kind of arise, whereas in Canada, it's like, okay, well, now they have to come up, and then if they come up, and then, man, if you have even, like you can't have a bad day. If they're up there, like, you can't, because they won't come back. And if they don't come back, then you're screwed, right?
And sometimes they're there to see you specifically, so the pressure that you must have on your back is immense, and it must be just a whole different lifestyle being a Canadian recruit and trying to get recruited by these D1 schools. But so next question I got for you, Jacob. Yeah. Let me get it up here. What separates you from every other Canadian in 2023? What makes you different? What's something that you can hang your hat on night in and night out that you can bring to the table for a post-secondary?
Yeah, well, the first thing that obviously stands out is what everybody points out is my physicals. Like, there's not that many guys that are 6'8", 245 and are as athletic as me.
Is there any? Yeah.
Like, there's guys that are like 6'10" and are true centers that can, like, do that kind of stuff. Like, Michael Nwoko is like, you know what I mean? That guy's a stud. He's down at Prolific. But, you know, I mean, that's a different kind of athlete too.
Aside from that, though, like, who's going to really match up with you?
Yeah.
Have you had any Canadians really give you a hard time?
Not really. Usually there's something that, like, another Canadian I'll play, like, there'll be some sort of weakness you can kind of attack, you know what I mean? You just got to find like, and a weakness doesn't necessarily mean they're bad at it. It just means the thing that they're the worst at. You know what I mean? So no, I haven't really had too much trouble with other Canadians. I usually find it's a little more trouble when you go down to the States, and then I can deal with one guy like me, even two, but when you have to go up against like a forest, it can be tough, right? Especially with, like, because you get like four guys that are like built like me, the same thing. It can be tough. But other than that,
yeah, especially when a guy's built like you playing the 2 or playing the 3. You know what I mean? Because you're 6'8" and you do really well for yourself as a 4 man, as a stretch 4 that can really do a lot of stuff on the court. But you go down to the States and there's guys built like you that are dribbling the ball like they're playing the 1. So it's crazy.
Yeah.
And it must be it must be tough sometimes playing against guys in the States. But I can imagine you had a pretty easy go up here in Canada so far.
Yeah, and the officiating is different. I prefer playing in the States that way.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I do, because they let you play a little bit more. It's not as, like, ticky-tacky, I find.
Yeah, hand checks kind of let go a little bit. Guys bang around in the paint and no one says nothing really, Yeah,
that kind of stuff. I prefer it that way, right? But other than that, like, the thing that even got me here was just the work ethic, man. Even from my first North Pole Hoops camp I went to, because Elias came out and whatever, the first thing he noticed was just that I wanted it. And, so that's one thing, is people don't see that as much, because obviously work ethic happens when people aren't watching, right? So, but that's something that, anyone that works with me can testify to. I do work my ass off when it comes to this stuff, because it's my dream. So, and then as a result of that, I don't feel like I have any glaring weakness. I think I can switch between all kinds of positions. Like, I might not necessarily guard a 1 and 2 guard all game, but if I get switched onto them, it's not like, you know what I mean? It's fine.
Yeah.
You can leave me there.
You're not liability. You're not liability.
Yeah,
exactly.
And even on offense, if you ask me to do a certain job, I can get that job done. So, and then also I have good grades for a prospect, I think, of my size and stature.
Yeah, 3.85 GPA is unbelievable. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
it's
and
impressive,
I'll talk
man.
Someone's damn ear off, man. I'm kind of marketable that way. So I think those are kind of the main things that make me stand out, right?
Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate that. So, like, you were speaking about the officiating. I wanted to just speak about what's the biggest difference between playing in the States, playing in Calgary, playing in maybe Ontario even. What do you notice, what's the biggest difference between playing at home and then playing on the road?
Yeah. Playing at home, it's like, Western Canada has a reputation for being kind of soft, right? And I think in BC it is the softest. Like, when I played in BC and I watched BC basketball, they call very questionable kind of, like, what was that calls. In Calgary, not so much. They're a little more, like, they look for, like, very by-the-book calls, but it can make for a little bit of, like mayo bread kind of games, just very stale. Whereas, they won't let you play as much as in the States, right? Like, it's just very, like, everything gets kind of called. And on Ontario is a mixed bag. I don't know what to think of Ontario. Like, it's like very up and down. Some games, some atmospheres are amazing, and some of them are like, what is going on? I can't speak a ton on Ontario because we didn't play a whole lot. I was mainly there during COVID, and with LBA we went down to Florida, so I can't speak a whole ton on that. But what I can say is, in America, I think they officiate it the best. Mm-hmm. Even being a Canadian guy and knowing that you're Canadian, they might call some stuff against you, but it's pretty minimal for the most part.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then I was going to say, so you got a 3.85 GPA, which is incredibly impressive, even if you're just straight doing school. But you're doing basketball on top of this, and not only are you doing basketball, you're a very, very high-level prospect. What's the most difficult part about being a high-level prospect, juggling your schoolwork, your basketball, your training, possibly hanging out with a girlfriend by chance, hanging out with your buddies? But, whatever it is, social life, whatever, you have to have a balance, right? So how difficult has it been for you traveling multiple different school each year? How difficult has this journey been, or has it been not difficult for you really at all?
I think it doesn't get easier. You just like it sounds so corny and by the book, but like you genuinely do get so much stronger and better at what you're doing that it starts to not feel as hard just because you're doing it all the time. You know what I mean? First time you pack your bags, you're like, oh man, I'm leaving home. Like it's tough, right? Like you're like, oh, I'm leaving my parents, I'm leaving all my friends. I have to go make new buddies, and then but it wasn't so bad. LBA, I was with the second family. I think it was the best transition I could have had. That's the hardest part, actually. That leads me into that point. The hardest part about being a student athlete to this day is you miss out on some holidays, you miss out on time with family, friends, all that stuff, right? Like, a lot of my time now you spend responding to coaches or responding to, like, it's more like the business side of basketball, and then it's all of a sudden it's like you get a text from your dad or a text from your mom, or you try and call them, and it's like, okay, well, now I have to go do this. Or by the time you're done practice, you're like, well, man, I gotta rest up, or I gotta head to bed early, or I gotta eat, and then it's like you're eating, you're trying to talk to them, like while you're trying to freaking talk to them, and it's not proper, right? So it's tough. And the other time, then it's like, okay, well, now I gotta do this, something happened to my car, and so then all of a sudden it's like, it seems like the only time you call them is when you need them, and then that's the wrong thing, because obviously you love your family, right? So That's the toughest part.
No, that hits close to home for sure, buddy. That's good. That's very good. We'll get off a little bit of the darker stuff, and we'll go into what's it like playing for a Canadian coach legend like Adam Huffman at CTA West. What's that been like for you?
I love that guy, man. He is my favorite coach I've ever had. He's just like, he brought he got me to learn how to accept a role. He taught me how to buy into a team. He taught me all that kind of stuff. I'm sure you can ask some coaches that I've had in the past. I was very stubborn, incredibly stubborn. I was known for that. I actually kind of feel bad. Like, if I went back to some coaches, I would apologize for how stubborn I was being, because, like, I don't know, Huff presented it in a way, or he did it in a way where I just learned. Like, he just connected with me in a way where he could teach me that stuff. And obviously now if I go to anywhere else, now I apply the same stuff that he taught me. But he's just instilled values, concepts, all this type of stuff that I would have never, ever learned if I never had gone to him. So, no, he's a legend, man. And we put together a good team of guys.
For sure, yes. He does year in and year out. Going off of that, I'd just like to speak on a little bit on your recruitment. How's your recruitment been going? Has Adam helped you with your recruitment at all? Or obviously he has. It's a rhetorical question. But I mean, like, how has he helped you? What's going on with your recruitment? Can you speak on a couple of schools that have reached out or interests that you have, if you don't mind?
Yeah, for sure. So after playing, like, this is the last one I remember was, and I'll mention some other schools along the way, but the last one I remember is we finished playing some team in California. I can't remember which team, but the list of schools that had, like, messaged in, like, the span of a couple days, or like 2 days, 3 days, it was like Clemson, Wyoming, UC San Diego, Montana State, South Dakota, North Dakota, Merrimack. I can't even think of all of them.
And what's
right
going
now.
through your head when you're getting these kind of messages, man? You're sitting there, and, like, after a couple of games, you played well. What's going through your mind when you're seeing these kind of messages roll in?
Those were messages to my coach. They weren't all to me. But I did get a bunch of stuff on Twitter. Like, you'll see coaches that will, like, message them. They'll, like, follow you or whatever. They'll like something. They'll, like, show that they're there.
Show face, yeah. Here I am, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, yeah, I'm there. But for the most part, he gets most of the messages, and then they'll ask for my number and then call me afterwards. But when I get those kinds of messages, it's like, it's kind of like, man, your work is kind of paying off. But what I do remember was what happened when I pressed off the gas. Do you remember when I got my first offer, and then, I don't know, it kind of went a little...
Slowed down a bit, yeah.
Yeah, it slowed down a bit.
Yeah.
And I never forgot that. So now I'm just like, I'm always like, to be successful, you have to have that fear, or kind of like, you strive off of the fear of not being successful, you have to almost have a little bit of anxiety. Like when you get those messages now, it's not like, okay, I'm done. Like I get to, I'm here and then now we're on to the next step. It's like, no, we just gotta you gotta keep pressing.
Yeah.
You just keep going.
100%.
Because otherwise, dude, it falls so fast. It all will just drop. And it's
because that's it. But it's
tough.
like, Jacob, all you're working for right now is to get this offer to go to a school next year. And then when you get to go to school next year, you cannot kick your feet up. You know what I mean? You know that more than anybody. The work just goes way more intensified, and it gets way harder. Now you're in a university. You're doing university level courses. You've got all kinds of other distractions, and you're playing at a high level Division I school. There's no end destination. It's got to be every day, like you just said, day in and day out, just the journey of it, right? Like it can't. There's no end goal where you're like, oh wow, here I go, I made it. Like, there's unless you're retired after a 20-year NBA career, or whatever it may be, or whatever your goals are. But it's like, it's got to be constant work, right?
And I want to say this too, is the mistake I made when I was first coming to prep and stuff was I wanted to stay home as long as possible before I had to go. And that's a huge mistake. What you should do is you should actually go down as fast as you can and get to know the coaches, get to know the players, get to know everybody, because other players are doing that and then they have an advantage over you when season starts. All of a sudden, coach is cracking a joke with a player and it's like, oh, it happened before you got here.
Inside jokes,
or it happened in preseason, right? And they already have a developed relationship, and you're like, okay, well now I'm coming in and now I'm just getting started and all that, right?
Yeah.
You got to develop that relationship as fast as you can. So that's ultimately what I recommend, and probably what I'm going to do. As soon as I commit, I'm like, when can I get down there?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, get down there, get in the mix, be a part of the culture and the ecosystem, and get in that atmosphere. So I'll wrap it up here. I don't want to take too much of your time when we're about 20 minutes in. Couple fun ones. So a fun one for a second last question here.
Yeah.
If you could play on an all-Canadian NBA team, you are starting. Who are the other 4 starters that are going to be on year 5 on your run? Who would you pick?
Oh, I actually I wrote this one down because this one's tough. I obviously like PG. This one was like no thought. This Shea. I got Shea at the 1, and then at the 2 I got Jamal. At the 3 it was tough because Wiggins has been hooping obviously, but I love Barrett. Like I love RJ. So it's between them, and then I got myself at the 4. And I got Kelly Olynyk at the 5 because he's from BC too.
I love that. Kelly Olynyk, that's sick. That's a solid 5, man. That's a solid 5.
I had to pick Kelly too, though, because he's from BC, man.
Yeah, and he's a stud too. He's got the big mop. How long has he been in the NBA for? Like he's been in the NBA for over 8-9 years. Like he's been he's been a state. Yeah, he's been a long time. I love that. And then so we'll just wrap it up here with about halfway through the season, your high school season, your last year, your senior year. What are your expectations for the rest of the season for yourself and for CTA West? What do you guys think you're going to do?
I think that we're a team that's gotten a lot better with time. Actually, exponentially better. We weren't very good at the beginning, and I just think that the second half of the season we're pretty good right now. And I think by the end of the season, we'll be one of the top teams in Canada. That's kind of the expectation. And I think if we can do that, really focusing on the we here, I don't really have to focus on what I'm going to do. Like if everyone eats and everyone's playing their role and doing their job, I'll eat too. So that's kind of my expectations, trying to be one of the top teams.
Yeah, and what are how do you judge that as a top team? Like, are you guys in the CJBL, or are you guys in some kind of league out there, or how do you decide for yourself as a top team in Canada?
Just the teams that we play against. Like we'll be heading out east at some point. Pretty sure in February we'll be heading out east, and we'll be playing a couple teams. So we'll see how we stack up against them at that point. But the goal is to try and beat as many teams as possible in Canada, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think that's kind of the gauge. We'll go out there, see what that's like.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. I appreciate your time.